Voices Unheard are a group of young people aged 16 to 25 from across Scotland who work alongside LGBT Youth Scotland staff and volunteers to conduct research and raise awareness of LGBTQ+ experiences of domestic abuse and unhealthy relationships. We have consulted LGBTQ+ young people from across Scotland to better understand their experiences of domestic abuse both in their own relationships and within their families, and to identify barriers to support. In sharing our findings, we hope that you not only learn about LGBTQ+ young people's experiences and the barriers that they face, but that you consider what you can do in your own practice, in your services and in your area of work to better respond to the needs of LGBTQ+ young people who experience domestic abuse.
LGBTQ+ young people learn about LGBTQ+ relationships from a variety of sources, but how accurate or helpful are these sources? About 70% of the young people we consulted felt that there was not enough resources about healthy relationships available for LGBTQ young plus people. Relationship dynamics can differ for LGBTQ+ relationships, but this is rarely portrayed accurately in LGBTQ+ TV or online representations. Often, representations of LGBTQ+ relationships contain outdated, stereotypical views of LGBTQ+ people, which means there's a real lack of healthy role models for young people. Most LGBTQ+ young people learn about LGBTQ+ identities and relationships from the internet or from friends. This is concerning as internet searches for LGBTQ+ relationships can bring up information from many sources. And not all of these will be accurate, healthy, or helpful. In fact, some contents can be very damaging. Although friends can be a great source of information about relationships, again, not everything is accurate, helpful, or healthy. There's no guarantee that the information a friend provides will be good for you. LGBTQ+ young people need targeted resources that not only outline the dynamics of abuse experienced by LGBTQ+ young people, but also offer advice on what a healthy LGBTQ+ relationship actually looks and feels like.
A lot of information about domestic abuse we see is focused only on men's violence against women and girls and doesn't reflect what abuse looks like on LGBTQ+ relationships. Because we have limited opportunity to learn about healthy LGBTQ+ relationships or abuse within LGBTQ+ relationships, young people are not always aware of what constitutes abuse and are not always able to identify their own experiences as such.
60% of the LGBTQ+ young people that we consulted indicated they'd experienced one or more abusive behaviors of the kind of list that we gave them from a partner or ex-partner. However, only 37.5% of those people were able to identify themselves as people who had experienced domestic abuse. And the trans young people were also more likely to experience domestic abuse than cisgender young people.
LGBTQ+ young people experience domestic abuse in similar ways to non-LGBTQ+ survivors, including physical abuse, sexual abuse, verbal, financial and emotional abuse, but also face additional risks and impacts related to their LGBTQ+ identity.
For example, LGBTQ+ young people are at greater risk of experiencing domestic abuse in their first LGBTQ+ relationship, particularly if their partner is either older than them or has been out longer, maybe is more cemented within their local LGBT community, or seems to have more knowledge and skill surrounding like what being LGBT is. This creates a power imbalance where one partner is seen as the expert, who's able to influence and control how the less experienced young person expresses themselves, engages with the wider LGBTQ+ community, and perceives themselves as well. Your first LGBTQ+ relationship can also be identity affirming. It makes you feel like you're a proper LGBTQ+ person, so it can be very difficult to recognize issues in the relationship or to leave.
LGBTQ+ young people often experience abuse related to their LGBTQ+ identity, such as homophobic, biphobic or transphobic verbal abuse, including deliberate misgendering.
Prevented from expressing their sexual orientation or gender identity at all, being forced to be in the closet, or conversely, having a partner or ex-partner threaten to or actually out them.
Being forced or coerced to engage in sexual activity under the guise of that's what LGBTQ+ people do. This can lead to internalized homophobia, biphobia and or transphobia, where the survivor develops negative feelings about being an LGBTQ+ person as a result of the abuse they experienced.
Domestic abuse has a significant impact on physical and mental health, such as low self-esteem, depression, anxiety, dissociative symptoms, self-harm and suicidal thoughts and actions. It also impacts other relationships, with many LGBTQ+ young people experiencing problems, trusting people in general, and having difficulties in other relationships, and isolation from friends, family, or community.
Domestic abuse can affect children and young people in many different ways, and especially LGBTQ+ young people, and it can affect them in many different ways in their family environments. In our research, we found that 60% of LGBTQ+ young people had witnessed abuse within their families, and 74% had actually experienced this abuse within their families. 60% of these people had also experienced homophobia, biphobia, or transphobia within this family environment, with about 47% prevented from expressing their own sort of identity, be this the person being a trans person or being gay, lesbian, bisexual, any of these queer identities. And 17% of these young people had experienced threats or had actually been outed in this family environment. This can have a lot of really negative impacts to LGBTQ+ young people, not only from witnessing or experiencing the abuse directly, but many of these, in fact the majority of the young people we spoke to, had really negative feelings about being an LGBTQ+ young person. More than half of LGBTQ+ young people who have witnessed or experienced abuse within their family environments have attempted suicide. And of the people we spoke to, we often found many, many detrimental effects of their mental health, including things such as anxiety or depression, low self-esteem and senses of shame and guilt around being an LGBTQ+ young person. A huge amount of the people we spoke to had experienced dissociative symptoms or post-traumatic stress disorder. When abuse in the family is centred around the perceived shame of the individual being an LGBTQ+ young person, this could be considered honour-based abuse.
LGBT young people experience the same barriers as everyone else, but they also have additional barriers on top of that relating to their gender identity or sexual orientation. They have additional anxieties over whether or not the service is going to be inclusive of those identities. They have fears that their relationships won't be understood within those services, that the service might be homophobic, biphobic or transphobic, or that other service users will be. There's also the added anxiety of outing themselves to this service, or the fear that the service might out them to someone else. There's also the massive fear that the service is going to contact their family, out them to their family, explain the situation to their family, possibly reach out to the abuser or contact the police when they really want this to be a private matter. Within LGBT relationships, they are much more likely to be polyamorous or non-monogamous, and there's very little information on how to support young people when they're within these types of relationships. There's additional barriers for these young people, as there's a lot of stigma around relationships that are non-monogamous, and that some services will not support them or be as understanding as they could be. From those that we consulted, the majority believed that the abuse that they had been a recipient of was a crime. However, only 10% of them actually reported this abuse. Those who had reported their abuse said that there was a sense that nothing was done, that the abuse had been minimised, that the report had been brushed off or not taken seriously, and that overall it just made things worse. There was a few who did say that it gave them a sense of relief that someone else had finally found out.
LGBTQ+ young people experience high levels of domestic abuse, both in their own relationships and within their families, but face significant barriers to accessing relevant information, specialist support, or reporting their experiences. Here are some actions you can take within your services to reduce those barriers and better meet the needs of LGBTQ+ young people affected by domestic abuse.
Take time to learn about LGBTQ+ experiences of domestic abuse and other forms of gender-based violence. Ensure your colleagues access training and learning as well.
Ensure your awareness raising includes LGBTQ+ identities and relationships, whether on social media, on your website, or in prevention work.
Make sure your service is visibly inclusive. Clearly state that you welcome LGBTQ+ people, including young people.
Be loud and proud about being an ally. Post LGBTQ+ info and stories on your social media. Engage in our cultural events and commemorative days. Even attend a local Pride event. And just in general, join our community.
Provide clear information on your confidentiality policy, reassuring LGBTQ+ people that they won't be outed without consent.
Make connections with your local LGBTQ+ organisations and services. Develop referral pathways.
Consult LGBTQ+ survivors to inform development of organisational policy and practice.
Let go of any fear that you have that you might use the wrong terminology and offend someone. If you're not sure, just ask. Say to someone, "That's not a term that I'm familiar with. Can you please explain what that means for you?" If you do make a mistake, just apologise and move on. There's no need to make a big deal. If you mess up someone's pronouns, just correct yourself and move past it.